I've got two guys that could make sense for the Royals to trade for in the offseason. I'll tell you about them next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I am your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, co-hosting, and some producing as well. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. I teased this in last night's episode, a very late episode for us. Maybe for some of you, you didn't get the chance to watch it until this morning or maybe early afternoon. And I know this one isn't technically an earlier episode that I promised, but from what I said last night, it is just a little bit earlier from what Monday's episode came out at. But in that episode, I talked about trade pieces, and I started to do more of a deep dive into who the Royals could trade for and who makes the most sense. Now, I want to preface it by saying these are guys that I feel like are affordable for Kansas City, and the team that would be trading them would be willing to trade, would be willing to sell off those guys based off what their expectations are for 2025, or maybe what that player's contract looks like. So if you are somebody out there listening and go, well, I hate that idea, I would hate for the Royals to trade for that type of player. Well, I'm just throwing out some ideas. These are not the only two players I think that would be available for trade and make sense for the Royals. We're going to be having more episodes down the road where we dive into more trade pieces. Probably the closer we get to winter meetings and when the offseason truly starts ramping up, we'll be able to do a deeper dive into that. But I read this article on Bleacher Report last week, and it was a player that should be traded from every team in Major League Baseball. Now, for the Royals, it was Brady Singer, and I do want to talk about that in tomorrow's episode about Brady Singer and maybe what he could get in return if the Royals do decide to get value out of him. But there were some other guys that really intrigued me, and the first one that came to mind was Mike Yastrzemski of the San Francisco Giants. Now, let me preface it by saying this would not be a sexy trade. This would not be a trade that makes the national media go, wow, the Royals got their guy. That is somebody that is going to transform their lineup. I don't view it that way. But I do view Mike Yastrzemski as an upgrade for the Royals outfield and would fill the leadoff problem that the Royals had all of 2024. So you dive into a little bit of the numbers of Mike Yastrzemski and why it would make sense. Number one, he looks like a Royal. He plays like a Royal. He's a smaller statured guy. He's somebody that can play all three outfield positions. He's got a lower OBP, but in that same breath, you also have to bring up that he's also traditionally not like most Royals leadoff hitters. And what I mean by that is if you just looked at the slash line of 2024, you would say, I don't want anything to do with that guy. His batting average is near what Kyle Isbell's was. His walk rate isn't over 10%. His OBP is just north of 300. I don't want Mike Yastrzemski, especially since he's going to be 35 in August of next year. But I look at it this way. Matt Quatrero loves to platoon his lineups. When there's a lefty on the bump, he likes to load it up with righties. And the Giants platooned Mike Yastrzemski in 2024 for the most part. I believe he had 52 games against lefties, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was 52 at bats. I'll go back and double check that. But he spent the majority of his time in 2024 facing right-handed hitters. Now, in his career, He's much better against righties than he is lefties. In 2024, there wasn't that drastic of a split. So I look at a guy that can play all three outfield spots, and he's more of a platoon guy. So it doesn't need to be your everyday right fielder, everyday left fielder, because I think Matt Quatraro is going to try to mix and match his outfield a little bit. And Mike Yastrzemski did have a good 2024. And for the most part, he was good in 2023. And if you don't believe me, here's a little bit of the numbers on a guy like Mike Yastrzemski. So you look at a guy, let's pencil him at the top of the order. In 2023, Mike Yastrzemski hit 233 with a 330 OBP. He had a 1.6 F-WAR, a 114 OPS plus, so 14 points higher than the league average, and a 12% walk rate. That would be a perfect penciled-in guy for the leadoff position. So that was 2023. He then followed it up with a little bit of regression in 2024, but still an OBP of 302, an F-WAR of 1.5, an OPS plus of 110 with an 8% walk rate. If you play that guy 130, 140 times a game or a season, that I think boosts your outfield a little bit. You look at what Hunter Renfroe, Kyle Isbell, and MJ Melendez did last year. They combined for an 87 OPS plus, or just north of 87 for an OPS plus. So that's 13 points below the league average, which is set at 100, of course. Mike Yastrzemski in his 6-year big league career, and he was a late bloomer, kind of like a Whit Merrifield, he has had a sub 100 OPS plus season once, and it was a 97 OPS plus season. So he's somebody that you kind of know what he's going to give you. If the Royals went and traded for Mike Yastrzemski, I don't think it would be that expensive of a trade. He's going to be a free agent after 2025. He's 34 years old, and he was a platoon guy for the Giants. The caveat here, the tough part is that he's set to make $9.5 million. So maybe you could work out something where you're not taking on all of the $9.5 million. You have the Giants pay for maybe half of it if you gave them a better prospect. And then you have somebody that can hit leadoff. Again, his career slash line at the leadoff position is 240, 341 with a 469 slug. So his OPS is north of 800, and he's had over 140 games leading off in his big league career. So I look at a guy like Mike Yastrzemski. It's not the sexy move. It's not the move that makes you jump up and down like crazy that the Royals got their future all-star, but he's consistent. And with the outfield this year, we saw so much inconsistency and durability for that matter. I look at what Mike Yastrzemski did in 2023 and 2024, and if you said, hey, those exact same numbers are going to happen in 140 games for the Royals in 2025, I would take it in a heartbeat, assuming you're not giving up a big-time piece, which for a 34-year-old that's going to be a free agent after 2025, I don't think you're having to go above and beyond to get a specific type of deal for the Giants. Also because they play in the National League. It's not like you're trying to work out a deal with the White Sox. Now, a move that I do believe would be very, very sexy would be having a return with Jorge Soler. I don't think it's completely out of the question. Again, for that Bleacher Report article I read, Mike Yastrzemski was seen as a fit for the Royals, and so was Jorge Soler. So I picked Mike Yastrzemski to talk about because the Royals are looking for a leadoff hitter. They're also looking for a power bat, a guy that can drive in runs for the middle of the order. Jorge Soler is that. And Jorge Soler is nothing like what he was in his final year in Kansas City. He has been a lethal part of multiple lineups since leaving Kansas City, since he was traded for Atlanta. He had the dramatic home run in Game 6 and got a big contract in Miami. Never really could stay healthy. He was an all-star in 2023 for the Marlins, but missed a lot of time in 2022. But last year, between 93 games with the Giants and 49 games with the Braves, he put together a 2024 where he had a 141 OPS plus. He had a 780 OPS, or excuse me, a 121 OPS plus, and he ran into 21 home runs in 2024, played in 142 games. The advanced metrics for Jorge Soler are much better than what they were in Jorge Soler's final year in Kansas City. And with Ronald Acuna coming back, hopefully he heals well, the Braves could be looking to move a guy like Jorge Soler. They tried to make a push late in 2024. They did get into the postseason. They didn't go that far. But the Royals have that connection with Jorge Soler. And again, with a guy that is making a chunk of money, I still think it's reasonable. I still think it's in that price range, right? He signed that 3-year, $42 million deal back in 2024, I believe would have been, right before he signed with the Giants, or it was after the Marlins season. He signed that 3-year deal with the Giants. So there's still 2 years left on that contract. I think you could find a way to maybe take that on. If you could, again, work out a deal with Atlanta where they could pay something of it. But I also look at it in the way of, if you're going to spend money and get a game changer for the middle of the order, yes, you could go out there and get Tyler O'Neill, right? You could go spend the money on Tyler O'Neill, and he's probably making anywhere from $15 to $20 million in free agency. You could go big with Alex Bregman to hit for the middle of your order. He's going to be more expensive than that, in my opinion, because he's a good defender. But you look at somebody like Jorge Soler, and you might be scared off by the contract. But if you were going to spend that type of money for a free agent, why not just pay it through trade, right? You look at what Soler would be worth right now for 2025 on the payroll toward Atlanta, it's $16 million. And then he'd be making $16 million in 2026. So that would be the tough part of, if he doesn't play well, now he's on the book for $16 million for 2026, then would be a free agent after that season for 2027. But Jorge Soler is kind of aging well. After he had that breakout year in 2019 with the Royals, he really took off. He had a step back, of course, when he didn't hit well in his final year in Kansas City, got flipped to Atlanta. But still, you look at a guy that, when healthy, is absolutely a run producer, has familiarity with Kansas City, and would be a big-time bat for the middle of the order. I personally would love a reunion. I'm not that scared away by the money if you take on that type of deal. And who knows, maybe you could work out some sort of deal where Atlanta does pay something. However, he was pretty good for Atlanta, so maybe they just say, I want to hang on to him. He would be a big piece of our lineup. But if they are looking to move him, because it'll be his age 33 season, and maybe they don't believe that he can stay healthy all year long, maybe that's an outlet you go to for the Royals, where you look at a guy that can absolutely hit in the middle of your order, driving a lot of runs, and give protection to a guy like Vinny Pasquantino and Salvador Perez. All right, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, I got some thoughts on the World Series, as the Dodgers are 1 win away from getting their first World Series since 2020, even though that was the COVID year. But the Yankees on the brink of elimination. I'll give you my thoughts on how this series has gone next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our first sponsor today in FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And for my Game 4 FanDuel pick, I'll go with Mookie Betts driving in at least 1 run tonight against the New York Yankees. So if I'm right, I'll feel pretty good tomorrow for our episode. But speaking of the World Series, the Dodgers have the Yankees on the ropes. This has not gone the way that I thought it would have gone. It didn't really surprise me that the Dodgers won the first 2 games, just because, I felt like the Dodgers are just more loaded and more well-rounded offensively. And even though the Yankees have the better rotation, that was a huge soul-crushing loss for the Yankees in Game 1, where it kind of carried in to Game 2. And the Yankees didn't really make a rally or didn't threaten the Dodgers until the final inning of that game. So it gets to Game 3, and the Dodgers jump on the Yankees early. Freddie Freeman's going to be the World Series MVP, assuming the Dodgers win, which right now when they're up 3-0, it has never happened in the World Series for a team to overcome that. You'd have to go back to the ALCS in 2004 when Boston overcame that 3-0 deficit against the New York Yankees. But all things are in favor of the Dodgers, so I think Freddie Freeman is going to win the World Series MVP. He's homered in all 3 games of this series. He's been ridiculous, and he's basically doing so on one leg. But what did bug me a little bit today, and I saw this on Twitter, I believe it was, but it was Dave Roberts being interviewed before the game. And Dave Roberts, along the line, or basically said along the lines of, nobody picked us to win the world going into the postseason. Nobody picked us, and we basically were an underdog. And just when I thought I was willing to, root for the Dodgers in this situation, again, if you're a small market fan, which of course, if you've come here to watch Locked On Royals, you're likely a Royals fan and you enjoy small market ball. So you're not rooting for either of these teams. And I'm really not either. But since the Royals got eliminated by the Yankees, I think I'd much rather see the Dodgers win because there's no rivalry. There's no bitterness between the Royals and the Dodgers. But still, just when I thought I had completely come around on it, Dave Roberts goes out there and says something like, we're the underdog. And that's just what drives a lot of people away from pulling from the lesser of two evils, right? Or when you're picking your poison, which team do you want to root for? And so many baseball fans have been struggling to find a team to root for. But Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, two guys I love seeing play, Shohei Ohtani, of course, they are undeniably great to watch. So therefore, I pulled for them because of the players themselves. I like Freddie Freeman. I like Mookie. I like Shohei Ohtani. But Dave Roberts is somebody where I go, it's more impressive to me. It really is. It's more impressive if you've got the pressure to win it all, and then you go out there and win it all, right? I would have loved it if Dave Roberts said, from the start of the season, which he did in this interview, he said, it was World Series or bust. And that's the way it's been really since Dave Roberts has been the manager for the LA Dodgers. But World Series or bust. If you say, yeah, it's World Series or bust, and we were always the better team, we had this immense pressure. We were facing elimination all the way back in the NLDS. We took on a red-hot Mets team, but we overcame all of it because we were the better team. I would have had more respect for Dave Roberts in that interview if he said, we were expected to win, and that's what we're going to do. You don't need to have this underdog mentality when everybody knows you're not. A team with 3 MVP winners in the top half of their order, right? You have to go through Betts, Ohtani, and Freeman back to back to back. 3 MVP winners, a team that had a league best 98 wins, 3 more than the next closest. They were the number 1 seed in the National League. They had home field throughout the entire postseason. You can't take somebody. And again, I picked against the Dodgers. I believe I got asked this on a Mailbag Friday when the divisional series was still going on, and I picked the Padres to win. And I said, it'll probably bite me in the ass because the Dodgers can easily win the next 2 games. And they did. And they've completely run through everybody else in the postseason. So I picked against them. But you can't say nobody picked you because a lot of people picked the Dodgers. And I know that in the NFL, the Patriots had done it, with underdog mentality, the last years of Brady. But this is not the same thing, in my opinion. This was a loaded roster from the beginning. They dealt with injuries just like everybody, and they've done a great job overcoming those injuries, right? Mookie Betts was out for a while. Freddie Freeman dealt with injuries, and they still had a loaded roster. I mean, again, even without those top 3 guys, you have Will Smith, you have Teoscar Hernandez, you have Max Muncy, you got Tommy Edman playing well, you got Kike Hernandez playing well. They did lose Tyler Glass now, but Walker Buehler is one of the best World Series pitchers, it appears, in recent history. So I would have loved it if right before tonight's game, Dave Roberts said, we're on the cusp of doing what everybody thought we could. And I don't think you need to earn respect from other people saying you're an underdog. If anything, that loses respect, I believe. If you call yourself an underdog when everybody knows you're not an underdog. We know who the best teams in every single sport are. When the Warriors had their dynasty and when the Bulls had their dynasty, nobody considered them an underdog because they just simply weren't. They had the best players out there. You look in the NFL, here locally with the Kansas City Chiefs, there's no way, even with the injuries they've had, you can say they are an underdog. The Patriots were never an underdog. The Cowboys in the 90s were never an underdog. You look to baseball, right? The 2000s Yankees, right? The late 90s Yankees, never an underdog. There are underdog teams. Like last year, the Arizona Diamondbacks were an underdog team. You could make that case. The Dodgers are not, though. And I do like Dave Roberts as manager, but I'm going, man, I was just almost there to feel totally fine about the Dodgers winning the World Series because that's what everybody thought was going to happen at the beginning of the year. Yes, I think a lot of people changed their opinion, including me. I was completely wrong about the Padres getting to the World Series. It was an early prediction, but that was really the only chance the Dodgers had at getting eliminated. They never really were threatened by the Mets. They always had a pretty comfortable lead in that series, and now they're up three games to none with a chance to sweep the New York Yankees in the World Series. But don't call yourself an underdog. You're a loaded team. You're a talented team. You have shown that even the best team in the American League is no match for you because the Dodgers have just mopped the floor with the Yankees in this World Series. They've been close games, but every time the Dodgers need a big hit or they need a big pitch, they come up with one, and the Yankees do not, and the Yankees are going to have to win out the rest of the way and overcome this 3-0 hole, which seems very, very unlikely at this point. All right, we'll take our final break of the show. When we come back, I'm going to give you a few guys I'm just not so high on going into spring training. That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our final sponsor and our title sponsor in PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get in on the sports action in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. PrizePicks also puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When your picks hit, you can get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. So sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. PrizePicks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly when you play that first lineup over at PrizePicks. I know that we're a ways away from spring training, and we haven't even seen some of the 40-man roster moves. Those are going to happen. Free agent signings are going to happen. Trades are going to happen. But I did think that it was time to take a very early look ahead into guys that maybe going into surprise I'm not too high on, and that I don't believe until proven otherwise, they are going to be a everyday player. That's what we're going to evaluate this at. I'm not talking about being a bench player or a guy that plays once every 6 games. I'm talking about a guy's prospects to be an everyday player in Kansas City. The first one is a guy that I get asked about pretty frequently, and that's Nick Loftin. Now, let me say this. I do believe Nick Loftin will be involved in this team, the 2025 club, far more than he was in 2024. I think the Royals should do the easy thing here and replace Garrett Hampson or Adam Frazier with Nick Loftin. I don't think you need to go out there and make another acquisition, give somebody a 1-year deal to replace the production that Adam Frazier and Garrett Hampson gave you. Nick Loftin can play every single position out there on the field. He's cheap, he's young, he's controllable, he's been up in the big leagues before. I don't think the Royals need to overthink it. But in terms of looking at him as an everyday player, I don't know if he's ever going to get there. I think that he is somebody that can absolutely fit as a role player, as a good piece for the lineup, but I do think there's just too many holes in that swing where you can expect him to be an everyday player. I think he's great to be a defensive replacement. He can play third base. He can play second base. He can play first. He can play the outfield. But he hit 189 in 148 at-bats in 2024. In his last 30 games, he went 9 for 83. That's a 108 batting average. So I don't know if I can see those numbers and say he's going to be a consistent contributor at the big league level. He might be that guy that just bounces back and forth between Omaha and Kansas City, assuming he's still got options. But to me, I think that his future in Kansas City, especially now that the Royals are much better than they were when Nick Loftin first came up, but I think he can be that super utility guy. Hey, he only plays once or twice a week. He only plays against lefties. He comes in as a defensive replacement. That feels like a more logistical option than spending money to replace Garrett Hampson or to replace Adam Frazier. The next guy I'm just not as high on, and this is unfair because he didn't get really an extended look. He got 5 at-bats in 2024, but that's Tyler Gentry. I did talk to Tyler Gentry in spring training, and I thought that he was going to take off in Omaha, and it took him a while to get going. But when he got up to Kansas City, he just really looked overmatched. And after that game in Houston where the Royals nearly got no hit by Framber Valdez, that's when they went out and made the move to bring in Robbie Grossman, Yuli Gurriel, and Tommy Pham, right? So I think the Royals knew immediately, hey, this is a guy that looks overmatched. We can't play him while we're in a pennant race. And the unfortunate part is, though he's 25 years old, he's just a little bit older as a prospect. If he was 21 or 22 and he had that chance and he looked overmatched, you don't really need to worry too much because there's still a lot of time there. But he's going to be 26 by spring training. So is that an everyday player? Probably not, but he still could be a bench bat there. He could be a 4th outfielder. Again, instead of Garrett Hampson, maybe it's Tyler Gentry that gets a look. He had good AAA numbers, but so did Nick Lofton. And that is one of my concerns, where is he somebody that hits well at the minor league level, but just can't make that jump to the big league? So to me, I think those two guys right now, I'm just not as high on. I want them to prove me wrong, to be honest with you, just because these are guys that I really liked in AAA. These are guys that I really was high on, but now the Royals have a different focus where they're not hoping for somebody to be a good big league ball player. They need guys to show they just are, that you can count on them. They're consistent. And I don't know if those guys are there just yet. And I'm not sure they will be an everyday starter for the Royals, but I do think they could thrive in more of a once a week type role, or a twice a week, or only against lefties, because both those guys are right-handed hitters. And the last guy that I do want to bring up that I'm just not expecting to have a great bounce back year is a guy that I've been riding with for a long time. That I think for the last 2 years, I thought there was going to be that breakout. It has to be MJ Melendez, unfortunately. And I shouldn't have maybe saved him toward the very end, because for a lot of people, they're already out on MJ Melendez. Some people don't want him on the roster. I'm not to that point, because I think he could be a valuable 4th outfielder with the power bat that he possesses. But to me, at what point in a big league ball player's career do you just say, it's not going to work out the way that everybody thinks it will? You can only have potential for so long at this level. You can only be a prospect or a guy with a big ceiling for a long time. Even J.J. Bacola said at the end of the season press conference that MJ's a perplexing player, which I do believe that to be true. I guarantee he looks good in batting practice. I guarantee that when facing AAA pitching, he can tear it up. We've seen the power. He's got raw power. He's strong. He's an athletic player. But as an everyday player, that's the big question. And I don't know if you could take a good offseason, a good spring training, and say to yourself, well, this time's going to be different. Because I'm not going to, personally. I'm not going to go into 2025 expecting the best version of MJ Melendez to happen. I think he could be a good 4th outfielder, and he could be somebody late in games that you could turn to off the bench to maybe run into one. But he is just somebody way, way too early right now, before we've seen any offseason workouts or any winter ball stuff, that I just don't think is going to make a huge jump that maybe some people are still holding on to in 2025. All right, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. You can always find me on Twitter, Rex, at JohnnyJ_15. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second, find Locked On MLB, as baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every aspect of the playoff picture. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the idea of trading Brady Singer, but until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.